People always ask me what it felt like, the moment I realized my ex-wife was trying to steal my lottery winnings. My name is Nolan Harper, and I'm 35 years old. Honestly, it wasn't shock. It wasn't disbelief. It was pure, crystalline rage. Nicole had walked out on me 3 years ago when I was broke, when I was struggling, when I needed her most. She took half of nothing and disappeared with Greg Carmen, some corporate suit who could afford the lifestyle I couldn't give her. Then I won $150 million. And suddenly, like a vulture circling fresh meat, she came back with a predatory lawyer named Therese Clarkson and a sob story about how our marriage technically hadn't been finalized properly. She thought I'd roll over. She thought I'd be the same defeated guy she'd left behind. But here's what Nicole didn't understand. Winning that money didn't just change my bank account. It changed me. And I was about to teach her the most expensive lesson of her life. You don't get to abandon someone and then demand a piece of their success. But let me start from the beginning. Before I go any further, let me know in the comments where in the world you are watching from. And make sure to subscribe because tomorrow I will share a story you don't want to miss. I was sitting in Brandon O'Brien's office 3 weeks after claiming my lottery winnings when he walked in with a face like someone had just kicked his dog. "We have a problem," he said, dropping a legal document on the desk between us. I picked it up. Petition for post-dissolution asset distribution. Nicole Donalds versus Nolan Harper. My ex-wife's name hit me like ice water. You've got to be kidding me. She's claiming the divorce settlement was inequitable because you purchased the winning lottery ticket during your marriage even though the drawing occurred after your separation. I felt my jaw tighten. We've been divorced for 3 years. She left me. She married some rich asshole 6 months later. Brandon nodded grimly. Her lawyer is Therese Clarkson. She's vicious, specializes in post-divorce asset recovery. She's arguing that California's community property laws entitle Nicole to half because the ticket was technically purchased before your divorce was finalized. That's insane. That's expensive legal gray area, Brandon corrected. And Therese knows it. She's banking on you settling rather than fighting. I stared at the document, my hands steady even though rage was building in my chest. Nicole had looked me in the eye 3 years ago and told me I'd never amount to anything. She'd packed her designer bags, the ones I'd scraped together money to buy her for our anniversary, and walked out to move in with Greg Carmen before our divorce was even final. And now she wanted half of what I'd won after she was gone. The door opened and my best friend Zach Morrison walked in. I'd asked him to meet me here for moral support. He took one look at my face and said, "What happened?" "Nicole's trying to take half my lottery money." "You're joking." "I wish I was." Zach's expression darkened. He'd been there during the divorce, had seen what Nicole's abandonment had done to me. "That's unbelievable. She can't actually think." "She does," Brandon interrupted. "And she's got a lawyer who's very good at finding loopholes." My phone buzzed on the desk. Text from an unknown number. "We should talk before this gets ugly. Nicole." I showed it to Brandon. He frowned. "Don't respond. Let me handle all communication." But I was already typing. "You want to talk? Fine. Keller's Coffee. 1 hour. Come alone." Brandon grabbed my wrist before I could hit send. "Nolan, don't." "I'm not hiding from her," I said, my voice cold and level. I pulled my hand free gently but firmly and sent the message. "She wants to play games? I'm going to look her in the eye and tell her exactly what's about to happen." "This is a mistake," Brandon said, his professional composure cracking slightly. "Any contact outside legal channels gives her ammunition. She could record the conversation, twist your words. Let her try." I stood up, sliding my phone into my pocket. I spent 3 years being the guy she walked all over. The guy who wasn't good enough. The guy with no prospects and no future. That's not who I am anymore, Brandon. And she needs to understand that before we ever set foot in a courtroom. Zach had been quiet until now. "You want me to come with you?" I shook my head. She said, "Come alone. I'm going to give her that courtesy. Maybe it'll be the last one she ever gets from me." Brandon ran a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated but recognizing he wasn't going to change my mind. "Fine. But don't make any agreements. Don't admit to anything, and for God's sake, don't threaten her, you understand?" "Perfectly." I mean it, Nolan. One wrong word and Therese Clarkson will use it to paint you as hostile and vindictive. I met his eyes. Nicole abandoned me when I had nothing. Now she's coming back because I have something. The only person who's going to look vindictive here is her. Trust me on that. I walked toward the door, Zach following a step behind. Call me after, Brandon said, resignation in his voice. And Nolan? Be careful. I didn't answer. Careful was the old Nolan. The one who let Nicole take half of nothing without a fight because I thought being reasonable would make the pain stop faster. The new Nolan? The one with 150 millions and nothing left to lose? He was about to remind Nicole Donalds exactly what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. Keller's Coffee was quiet that afternoon. Just a few people scattered at tables, the hiss of the espresso machine providing white noise. I'd chosen a booth in the back corner, my back to the wall, where I could see the entrance. Nicole walked in exactly 1 hour later, and I'll admit it, she looked good. Designer handbag hanging from her shoulder, perfect hair, clothes that probably cost more than I used to make in a month. She spotted me and smiled, that same confident smile she'd worn when she told me she was leaving. She slid into the booth across from me like we were old friends catching up. You look good, Nolan, she said warmly. Success suits you. Cut the shit, Nicole. Why are you doing this? Her smile didn't waver. Because I'm entitled to it. We were married when you bought that ticket. We were separated. You'd already moved in with Greg. Legally, we were still married. California community property law is very clear. I leaned forward, keeping my voice level and hard. You know what I remember, Nicole? I remember you telling me I'd never amount to anything. I remember you saying I was a loser with no ambition. I remember you packing your bags and walking out because Greg Carmen could give you the life I couldn't. You didn't want me then. You don't get me now. Something flickered in her eyes. Calculation, maybe a hint of shame. But she recovered quickly. This isn't personal, Nolan. It's business. That ticket was purchased with marital funds. Marital funds? I let out a harsh laugh. You mean the $20 I scraped together from doing odd jobs because you'd already cleaned out our joint account? That's what you're claiming entitlement to? The law doesn't care about your feelings. My lawyer says we have a strong case. Your lawyer is a vulture, and so are you. I pulled out my phone and opened my photos. Remember these? I showed her screenshots I'd saved from our divorce proceedings. Text messages where she'd explicitly stated she wanted nothing more from me. Emails where she'd waived any future claims to my income or assets. Documents she'd signed saying the divorce settlement was fair and final. Her confidence cracked slightly. She stared at the screen, her perfectly painted lips pressing into a thin line. That was before I had something worth taking, I finished. That's exactly my point, Nicole. You don't get to waive your rights when I'm broke and then reassert them when I'm rich. But here's what's really going to happen. I'm going to bury you in legal fees. I'm going to drag this out until your scumbag lawyer bleeds you dry. And when the judge finally throws out your joke of a case, I'm going to countersue you for malicious litigation and make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You're making a mistake. No, I said, standing to match her height, my voice dropping to something dangerous. You made the mistake. 3 years ago when you gave up any right to be part of my life. Now you're going to learn what it costs to be greedy. She opened her mouth, closed it, then turned and walked toward the exit. I watched her go, and even from behind I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her confident stride had turned stiff and uncertain. Good. Let her worry. I drove straight back to Brandon's office. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my mind was racing with cold, focused anger. Brandon looked up when I walked in. How'd it go? Exactly like you'd expect. She thinks she's entitled to my money because some law says so. She thinks I'll roll over. Zach was still there, sitting in one of the guest chairs. He straightened up when he saw my face. I sat down across from Brandon. I want you to fight this with everything we have. No settlements, no negotiations. I want discovery. I want depositions. I want her life under a microscope. Brandon looked concerned. Nolan, that could cost you hundreds of thousands in legal fees. I have $150 million, I said flatly. I'll spend 10 million if I have to. This isn't about the money. It's about making sure she understands she can't do this. Zach leaned forward. What do you need from me? You still have contacts at Nicole's old company, right? Before she quit to be Greg's trophy wife? He nodded slowly. Yeah, why? Because I need to know everything. Her finances. Greg's finances. How they've been living. I need ammunition. Brandon held up a hand. Be very careful here. If it looks like you're harassing her, I'm not harassing anyone. I'm conducting due diligence for my legal defense. Nicole claims she needs money. I'm going to prove she's living quite comfortably, and this is pure opportunism. You ever notice how quickly things move when you actually have resources? When I was broke, everything took forever. Now, with money and determination, I could make things happen fast. Over the next 2 weeks, I built my case piece by piece. Zach came through first. He'd reached out to some mutual acquaintances who still worked in Nicole's old industry, asked around about her and Greg. Greg Carmen makes over $800,000 a year as a corporate VP. Zach told me over the phone. Nicole lives in a $2.3 million house. She drives a Mercedes. They took 3 luxury vacations last year: Bali, Paris, and the Maldives. She doesn't need my money, I said quietly. She wants it. Exactly. But I needed more than gossip. I needed facts that would hold up in court. I hired a forensic accountant named Danny Connor. Brandon recommended him. Danny was thorough, meticulous, the kind of guy who could trace a dollar through a dozen shell companies. I gave him access to everything from my marriage, bank statements, tax returns, credit card records, everything I'd kept from those years. Danny called me a week later. You're going to want to see this. We met at his office downtown. He had printouts spread across his desk, highlighted sections, notes in the margins. Your ex-wife was planning to leave you for at least 6 months before she actually did, Danny said, pointing to a series of transactions. Look at this pattern. She systematically moved money out of your joint account starting in February 3 years ago. Small amounts at first, 500 here, 1,000 there. Nothing that would trigger immediate attention. But over 6 months, she pulled out nearly $18,000 and deposited it into an account you didn't have access to. My jaw tightened. She was stockpiling cash while I struggled to pay rent. That's exactly what she was doing. And here's the thing. This undermines her entire argument. She can't claim the divorce settlement was inequitable when she's the one who created the financial imbalance. She deliberately left you in a compromised position. I took the report back to Brandon that afternoon. He read through it carefully, making notes. This is actually good for us. It shows premeditated financial abandonment. She was planning to leave and securing her assets while you were unaware. That undermines her claim that the divorce settlement was unfair or signed under duress. Can we use this in court? Absolutely. This changes the narrative from desperate wife forced to accept unfair settlement to calculated spouse who manipulated the situation for her own benefit. For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt like I had real leverage. Late one night, maybe 10:30, my phone rang. Zach. You're going to want to hear this, he said. I had drinks with Lindsay Foster. She used to work with Nicole. Apparently Nicole's been telling people she's owed this money. She's been bragging about it. Bragging? Saying she was smart to keep the legal door open. That she always knew you'd eventually get lucky and she'd positioned herself to capitalize on it. Something cold settled in my chest. She planned this. From the beginning. Looks like it. Lindsay's willing to testify to what Nicole told her if it comes to that. Get her contact information to Brandon. This just became a lot easier. The preliminary hearing was set for mid-October, a Tuesday morning that came too fast and too slow at the same time. I walked into the courthouse with Brandon at 9:15, dressed in a simple navy suit. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed lottery winner. Brandon had advised me to look professional, but not wealthy. You want the judge to see you as someone protecting what you earned, not as someone flaunting it. Nicole arrived 10 minutes later. I watched her walk up the courthouse steps with Therese Clarkson, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who carried herself like she'd won every fight she'd ever picked. Nicole wore a pale blue dress, pearls, the whole demure act. Playing the victim already. We didn't speak, didn't make eye contact, just filed into the courtroom and sat on opposite sides. Judge Kyle Smith walked in at 9:30 sharp. A no-nonsense man in his early 60s with gray hair and reading glasses perched on his nose. He reviewed the filings for a moment, then looked up with obvious skepticism written all over his face. "Ms. Clarkson," he said, "you're asking this court to revisit a divorce settlement finalized 3 years ago because your client believes she's entitled to lottery winnings from a ticket purchased after the parties separated." Therese stood smoothly. "Your Honor, the ticket was purchased before the divorce was legally finalized, making it community property under California law. The ticket was purchased with separate funds earned by my client during separation," Brandon interrupted, standing to match her. "Ms. Donalds had already vacated the marital home, established residence with her current husband, and explicitly waived any future claims to my client's income or assets in the divorce settlement she voluntarily signed." Judge Smith looked at Nicole. "Ms. Donalds, were you coerced into signing your divorce settlement?" Nicole straightened in her chair. "No, Your Honor, but I didn't anticipate that your ex-husband would win the lottery." The judge's tone was dry, almost amused. "I imagine he didn't anticipate that either. The fact that circumstances changed doesn't invalidate an agreement both parties entered willingly." I felt something loosen in my chest. The judge got it. Therese jumped in. "Your Honor, we're prepared to demonstrate that the settlement was signed under financial duress." "Financial duress she herself created," Brandon said calmly, producing Danny Connor's report. "Your Honor, I have forensic accounting evidence showing that Ms. Donald systematically depleted marital accounts in the months prior to separation, leaving Mr. Harper in a financially compromised position that she now claims made the settlement inequitable. She created the very duress she's alleging." Judge Smith's eyebrows rose. He held out his hand and Brandon passed him the report. The courtroom went silent while the judge read. You could hear people shifting in their seats, the clock on the wall ticking. Nicole stared straight ahead, but I saw her jaw tighten. "Ms. Clarkson?" Judge Smith said finally. Therese's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "We dispute the characterization of those transactions." "I'm sure you do." Judge Smith set down the report. "Mr. O'Brien, I'm inclined to dismiss this petition, but I'll give Ms. Clarkson 30 days to provide compelling evidence that the original settlement should be revisited. If she can't, we're done here." It was a partial victory, but I'd take it. Outside the courthouse, I walked toward Brandon's car when I heard her voice behind me. "Nolan, please, can we just talk?" "Through our lawyers," I said coldly, not stopping. "You're being cruel." I stopped, turned back. Nicole stood there on the courthouse steps, looking like she might cry. "Cruel?" I kept my voice level but hard. "You abandoned me when I had nothing. You married someone else. You moved on with your life. And now you want to swoop back in and take what I earned after you were gone? That's not cruelty, Nicole. That's justice. And you're about to get a very thorough education in how it works." The 30 days passed like waiting for a punch you knew was coming. Brandon called me on day 29. His voice had that careful tone people use when they're about to deliver bad news. "We have a problem," he said. I was in my car, halfway to the gym. I pulled over. "What kind of problem?" Therese found a precedent. 1987 California case. Lottery ticket purchased during separation was deemed community property. She filed a motion arguing it supports Nicole's claim. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. "You said we had this." I said I thought we did. "But Nolan, if Judge Smith finds this precedent applicable, we could actually lose." The words hit like ice water. Lose. Give Nicole half of everything I'd won after she'd abandoned me. "What do we do?" "We prove your case is different." Brandon's voice steadied, shifting into lawyer mode. "That 1987 case involved a couple still living together during separation. Same house, shared expenses, commingled finances. You and Nicole were completely separated. Different residences, no shared accounts, total financial independence. We need to draw that line so clearly the judge can't miss it." "Then let's draw it." The second hearing was set for early November. I walked into that courtroom feeling like I had more to lose than the first time. The partial victory had given me hope, and hope was dangerous. It meant I could be crushed. This hearing ran longer, more technical. Therese stood and argued her precedent with the kind of confidence that made my stomach turn. She cited case law, precedents, California statutes, made it sound airtight. Brandon countered methodically. He presented bank statements showing zero shared finances after Nicole moved out, lease agreements proving separate residences, phone records demonstrating we hadn't even spoken in the 6 months before the divorce finalized. Your Honor, Brandon said, the 1987 case Ms. Clarkson cites involved a married couple who were legally separated, but practically still functioning as a household. They lived together, ate meals together, shared expenses. That is fundamentally different from my client's situation, where the parties had completely severed their relationship in every meaningful way, except the final paperwork. Therese tried to interrupt, but Judge Smith held up a hand. Ms. Clarkson, I've reviewed your precedent. Mr. O'Brien makes a valid distinction, but before I rule, I want to hear from Ms. Donalds directly. Nicole straightened in her chair, and I saw her exchange a quick glance with Therese. Judge Smith looked at her. Ms. Donalds, when you signed your divorce settlement, did you believe it was fair? The courtroom went silent. Nicole hesitated. You could see her trying to figure out the right answer, the strategic answer, but there was only one truthful answer, and Judge Smith's expression said he'd know if she lied. At the time, yes, she said quietly, but at the time, Judge Smith repeated, cutting her off. Before your ex-husband won the lottery. Yes. And you've since remarried someone with substantial income? Nicole's jaw tightened. That's not relevant. It's extremely relevant to whether you have genuine need or are simply opportunistic. Judge Smith looked down at the case file, then back up. I've reviewed everything here, and I'm going to be very clear. Ms. Donalds, you voluntarily entered into a settlement agreement that you acknowledged was fair. You've since established a comfortable life with your current spouse. The only thing that's changed is that your ex-husband experienced unexpected good fortune. Fortune that came entirely after your marriage ended in practice, if not in legal technicality. My heart was pounding. California community property law exists to ensure fairness, not to reward buyers' remorse. The 1987 case Ms. Clarkson cites is distinguishable on its facts. This court finds that the lottery ticket in question was purchased with Mr. Harper's separate funds during a period of complete separation, and that Ms. Donalds explicitly waived any future claims to his income or assets. Judge Smith looked directly at Nicole, and his expression was granite. I'm denying the petition. The original divorce settlement stands. Furthermore, I'm ordering Ms. Donalds to pay Mr. Harper's legal fees incurred in defending against this action. This case is dismissed with prejudice. The gavel came down. I felt something enormous lift off my chest, like I'd been holding my breath underwater and finally broke the surface. Brandon grabbed my hand, shaking it, grinning. Across the courtroom, Nicole looked shattered. Therese was already packing her briefcase with sharp, angry movements that said she knew exactly how badly they'd lost. That evening, I walked out of the courthouse with Brandon, who was talking about next steps, about getting the fee order enforced, about making sure Nicole couldn't weasel out of paying. I was only half listening. I felt light. Free. Nolan. Nicole's voice stopped me on the steps. She stood there looking smaller somehow. The expensive clothes, the perfect makeup. None of it could hide the defeat in her eyes. Nolan, I'm sorry. I just thought... You thought you could take what wasn't yours, I said quietly, cutting her off. And you were wrong. She opened her mouth, closed it. For the first time since this nightmare started, she looked genuinely remorseful. But it was too late for that. Goodbye, Nicole. I turned and walked away, and I didn't look back. The weeks after the court victory felt strange. Peaceful, but in that way where you keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'd won. Nicole was legally barred from touching my money. Judge Smith had made it crystal clear. But I couldn't quite shake the feeling that it wasn't over. I was having coffee with Chris Zavala in early December, my financial advisor helping me work through some investment strategies for the new year, when my phone rang. Brandon O'Brien. We have a situation, he said without preamble. My stomach dropped. The coffee suddenly tasted bitter. Nicole's appealing? No, worse. Greg Carmen is suing you for alienation of affection. I blinked, set down my cup. Chris looked at me with concern. What? I said. Nicole's husband. He's claiming that your legal battle with Nicole destroyed their marriage and he's suing you for emotional damages. I laughed out loud. I couldn't help it. The absurdity of it hit me like a punchline. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. It's also a real lawsuit, Brandon said, his voice grim. Alienation of affection suits are rare, but they're still legal in a few states. Greg's filing in North Carolina where he claims emotional harm occurred during a business trip. Can he do that? He can file it. Whether it goes anywhere is another question. But Nolan, this is what I was worried about. These people aren't going to stop. They're going to keep coming at you from different angles until something sticks or you pay them to go away. I felt the anger return, cold and focused. That familiar weight settling back into my chest. Then we fight again. This could get expensive. I don't care. I'm not giving them a dime. Chris was watching me across the table, and when I hung up, he shook his head. Your ex-wife's husband is suing you? Yeah, for ruining his marriage, apparently. That's insane. That's my life right now. Over the next few days, I learned more about Greg Carmen, and the picture wasn't pretty. Zach helped me dig, because of course he did. That's what best friends do when someone's coming after you. Greg's business was struggling. His company had posted losses for 3 straight quarters. He'd taken out a second mortgage on that big house he shared with Nicole, the one he'd bought to impress her, probably. The guy was bleeding money, and now he was desperate. Then Zach called with the real bombshell. Greg and Nicole are getting divorced, he said. Lindsay heard it from someone who works with Greg. Apparently, their marriage imploded after your court case. Nicole blamed Greg for not being richer. Greg blamed Nicole for wasting money on lawyers. It got ugly. I sat back in my chair, processing that. So, Greg's lawsuit is probably revenge. Or a desperate cash grab, maybe both. The lawsuit itself was flimsy. Brandon filed a motion to dismiss based on lack of jurisdiction. Greg couldn't just pick a random state to file in because he took a business trip there once. The North Carolina judge agreed and tossed it out within 2 weeks. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The harassment started small, subtle. First, a demand letter arrived from some creditor I'd never heard of, Pinnacle Financial Services, claiming I owed Nicole money from our marriage. Some old joint credit card debt they said I'd never paid. I showed it to Brandon. He proved it was false within 2 days. The credit card didn't exist. Pinnacle Financial Services was a shell company registered 3 weeks ago. Then the emails started. Anonymous. Sent from disposable accounts. Did you report your lottery winnings correctly? The IRS might want to take a closer look at your taxes. Interesting how you suddenly have all this money. Wonder if you're hiding assets. My accountant reviewed everything. Twice. I was clean. But the emails kept coming. Each one designed to make me paranoid, make me second guess, make me wonder if maybe I'd missed something. And then the tabloid reporter showed up. A guy named Derek Hastings knocked on my neighbor's door, asking questions about my lavish lifestyle and whether I was hiding assets or living beyond my means. My neighbor Margaret, a retired teacher who'd lived next door for 20 years, told him to get lost and called me immediately. Some creep was asking about you, she said. Wanted to know if you throw wild parties, if you have expensive cars, if people come and go at all hours. I told him you're the quietest neighbor I've ever had and he should be ashamed of himself. I thanked her, but my hands were shaking when I hung up. Each incident was minor. Each one individually was just noise. But together, it was a pattern, a campaign. Someone was trying to wear me down piece by piece until I broke. I called Brandon after the 3rd incident, the tabloid reporter sniffing around my neighborhood. This is coordinated, I said flatly. Nicole and Greg are tag-teaming me. Brandon sighed. Probably, but we can't prove it, and individual nuisance suits are hard to fight preemptively. So what do I do? Document everything. Don't engage, and consider getting a restraining order if this escalates to actual harassment. I hung up, but I was done playing defense. Time to take the fight to them. I hired a private investigator named Monty Clarkson, no relation to Therese, thank God, to look into Greg and Nicole's activities. He was thorough, discreet, and expensive. Worth every penny. What he found was damning. Greg Carmen had been contacting my friends, former colleagues, even Chris Zavala, my financial advisor, trying to dig up dirt on me. He'd posed as a journalist for one call, a potential business partner for another. In one case, and this was the kicker, he'd actually impersonated a lawyer. Several people had reported his behavior as suspicious. Chris had kept detailed notes of a weird phone call where someone claiming to be from a law firm asked probing questions about my investment strategy and whether I'd made any questionable financial decisions. That was Greg, Monty said, showing me phone records that traced back to Greg's cell. He's sloppy. Didn't even bother masking his number half the time. Nicole, meanwhile, had been posting on social media. Nothing direct, she was smarter than that, but plenty of thinly veiled references. Some people forget where they came from when they get a little success. Toxic exes who won't let go of the past are the worst. Funny how money changes people. Or maybe it just reveals who they always were. Her friends understood exactly who she was talking about. Monty had screenshots of the comments, people saying things like, "Stay strong, Nicole," and "He doesn't deserve you." "This is defamation," Brandon said, when I showed him Monty's report. "And Greg's impersonation of a lawyer could be criminal. Can we use this?" "Absolutely. I'll draft a cease and desist to both of them. If they don't stop, we file for a restraining order and a defamation suit." The cease and desist letters went out on January 15th. They were blunt, direct, the kind of legal language that makes it clear you're not messing around anymore. Stop contacting Nolan Harper's associates. Stop making public statements about him. Stop filing frivolous legal claims. Or face legal consequences including restraining orders, defamation suits, and possible criminal charges for impersonation. For a few days, everything went quiet. Then my phone rang. Nicole's number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "Nolan, please," she said, and her voice was shaking. Really shaking, not the fake tremor she'd used in the past when she wanted something. "You have to call off your lawyers. Greg is threatening me. He says this is all my fault and he's going to take everything in our divorce. I have nothing. I need help." I felt no sympathy, not even a flicker. "You came after my money, Nicole. You tried to steal from me. You sicked your husband on me. And now you want me to feel sorry for you? I made a mistake. You made a choice," I said, my voice cold and flat. "And choices have consequences. You're experiencing yours. I'm begging you. Lose my number." I hung up. It felt good. Cold, maybe, but good. She'd made her bed. Now she could lie in it. By late January, Zach called me with an update I'd been half expecting. "They're both ruined," he said without preamble. I was at my house looking out at the view I'd bought with money Nicole had tried to steal. "Tell me." Greg's company declared bankruptcy. The lawsuit revelations spooked his business partners. They pulled their investments when they learned about his erratic behavior. He lost his job, lost the house. And get this. In the divorce settlement with Nicole, he's been ordered to pay substantial alimony. "But he has no income," I said. "Exactly. He's living with his parents now, 43 years old, back in his childhood bedroom." I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No pity. Just nothing. "And Nicole?" "Burned through everything fighting you, then fighting Greg. Teresa's legal bills alone were over 200 grand. She's moved in with her sister, small apartment, working as a retail manager at some department store. Had to sell the Mercedes. I pictured Nicole in a cheap apartment folding clothes for minimum wage. The same woman who'd driven a luxury car and lived in a mansion just months ago. People are calling them the cautionary tale of greed," Zach added. "Lindsay told me it's all anyone in their old social circle talks about, how they destroyed themselves trying to get rich quick off someone else's success." There was a pause. "You really feel nothing for her?" Zach asked carefully. "She made her choices, Zach. I'm not responsible for the consequences." "I know, I want to make sure you're okay. This whole thing has been brutal." He was right. The constant fighting, the paranoia, the anger, it had taken a toll. But I also felt something I hadn't felt in years. "I'm better than okay," I said. "I'm finally free of her." And I meant it. February arrived, and with it, real peace. The lawsuits were over. The harassment had stopped. Greg and Nicole were too broke and too busy with their own disasters to bother me anymore. I could finally breathe. I threw myself into building something positive, something that mattered. I'd already established a charitable foundation during the chaos, but now I expanded it. Financial literacy programs for low-income families, teaching people the basics I'd had to learn the hard way. How to budget, how to save, how to avoid predatory lenders and scam artists. I funded scholarships for kids who wanted college but couldn't afford it. 20 full rides that first year, covering tuition, books, housing, everything. And I started volunteering at the local community center, teaching basic financial management every Tuesday and Thursday evening, helping people understand credit scores, retirement accounts, emergency funds. The first class I taught, there were 8 people, mostly older folks who'd never learned this stuff, plus a couple of young parents trying to get their lives together. Money doesn't have to control you, I told them that first night. You can learn to control it. That's what I'm here to help you do. One woman, Margaret Holloway, must have been in her 60s, raised her hand. You really doing this for free? Yes, ma'am. Why? I thought about that. About Nicole and Greg. About the months of fighting. About everything I'd been through. Because I know what it's like to have nothing, I said. And I know what it's like when people try to take what little you've built. I want to help people protect themselves. Build something real. She nodded slowly. That's decent of you. It felt good. Using my money for something meaningful instead of just defending it from vultures. I remembered sitting in my old apartment, the one I'd lived in when Nicole left, eating ramen because it was all I could afford. I remembered the shame of being broke, the helplessness of watching bills pile up with no way to pay them. If I could help even one person avoid that feeling, it was worth it. The weeks passed. The foundation grew. The volunteer work expanded. And for the first time since winning the lottery, I felt like I was actually living instead of just surviving. Nicole had tried to steal my future. Instead, I'd built one she could never touch. One evening in mid-February, Zach convinced me to join him for dinner at a casual Italian place downtown. Just a few people, he said. Low-key, you need to get out more. I almost said no. But he was right. I'd been so focused on the foundation and volunteer work that I'd barely had a social life in months. Sally Nielsen was already at the table when we arrived. Zach's cousin, he'd mentioned. She had an easy smile and wore a simple sweater, no designer labels, no expensive jewelry. Just normal. Sally, this is Nolan, Zach said. Nolan, Sally just moved back to town. Nice to meet you, she said, shaking my hand. We sat, ordered food, talked. She taught 4th grade and spent most of dinner telling stories about her students. The kid who insisted dinosaurs still lived in his backyard, the girl who'd finally mastered long division after weeks of struggling. She talked about them the way some people talk about family, with genuine affection, passion. I couldn't remember Nicole ever talking about anything that way except money. What do you do? Sally asked eventually. I'm between things right now, I said carefully. Doing some charity work, teaching financial literacy classes. That's wonderful. We need more of that. No questions about where I lived, what I drove, what my bank account looked like. Just normal conversation. It felt good. We started seeing each other after that. Coffee dates, long walks through the park. Movie nights where we actually watched the movie instead of checking our phones. Nothing rushed, nothing forced. Just 2 people getting to know each other. One evening over dinner at a quiet restaurant, Sally set down her fork and looked at me. You're different from what I expected, she said. How so? Zach told me you'd been through hell with your ex-wife. I expected you to be bitter, closed off. But you're not. You're careful, sure, but you're also kind, generous. I thought about that, about Nicole, about the months of fighting, about building walls versus building boundaries. I learned a lot about who I want to be, I said. Protecting myself doesn't mean becoming cruel. It means having boundaries. She smiled. I like that. I liked her too. More than I'd expected to. In March, Brandon called. Nicole's filed for bankruptcy, he said. She's liquidating everything, wanted you to know. Thanks for the heads up. There was a pause. You won, Nolan. Completely. She's lost everything. Her money, her marriage, her lifestyle. Some people might say she's paid enough. Some people might, I agreed. I'm not saying you should feel bad, just making sure you're at peace with how this turned out. I thought about it. Nicole's life had imploded. Greg was ruined. I'd spent hundreds of thousands defending myself, but I still had my money, my dignity, Sally, a life I was building on my own terms. Yeah, I said. I'm at peace. By summer, everything had transformed. Sally and I were serious, talking about moving in together, making real plans. I'd bought a beautiful property in wine country and started a business running corporate retreats focused on ethical leadership and financial responsibility. When I asked Zach to be my business partner, he looked at me like I was crazy. You sure about this? You gave me your time when I had nothing, I said. Let me give you something back. The retreats combined everything I'd learned the hard way: how to lead with integrity, how to make decisions that honored your values instead of just your bank account. It felt right. One July afternoon, I was wrapping up a financial literacy class at the community center when I noticed someone in the back of the room. Nicole. She looked different, older, tired, wearing discount store clothes instead of designer labels. Everyone else filed out. She waited until we were alone. I didn't know you taught here, she said quietly. What are you doing here, Nicole? I'm volunteering, helping with the after-school program. She swallowed. I needed to do something that mattered. I studied her. No manipulation in her eyes now, no calculation. Just exhaustion and what looked like genuine remorse. I'm sorry, she said. For everything. You were right. I was greedy. I was cruel. I destroyed my own life chasing money that wasn't mine. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger. Nothing. She was just a person who'd made terrible choices and was living with them. I hope you figure things out, I said neutrally. Are you happy? She asked. Really? I thought of Sally, waiting for me at home, the business I was building, the kids I'd helped send to college, the life I'd constructed from the ashes of what Nicole had tried to destroy. Yeah, I said. I really am. She nodded, tears in her eyes, and walked away. I never saw her again. A year later, I married Sally in a small ceremony at a vineyard overlooking the valley. Close friends and family, nothing extravagant, just the people who mattered. Zach stood beside me as my best man, grinning like an idiot when I fumbled with the ring. Sally looked beautiful in a simple dress, her smile completely genuine as she said her vows. When the officiant pronounced us married, I kissed her and felt something settle deep in my chest. This was what winning actually looked like. We spent 3 weeks in Italy for our honeymoon. Rome, Florence, the Amalfi Coast, eating incredible pasta and drinking wine that cost more than my rent used to be, walking through ancient streets at sunset, laughing over terrible attempts at Italian. Not once did we talk about lawsuits or ex-wives or any of the drama that had consumed so much of my life. It was perfect. I kept tabs on Nicole through mutual acquaintances, not out of vindictiveness, but simple curiosity. She'd rebuilt a quiet life. Teacher's aide at an elementary school, modest apartment. Kept her head down, didn't make waves. From what I heard, she was genuinely trying to become someone better than she'd been. Good for her, I guess. Greg had moved out of state, somewhere in Colorado, working sales. Apparently sober now, attending therapy regularly. Both of them had learned expensive lessons about greed and consequences. I didn't feel sorry for them, but I didn't feel the need to keep punishing them either. They'd punished themselves more thoroughly than I ever could. You know what I learned through all of this? Winning isn't just about keeping what's yours. It's about becoming someone you're proud to be. Yeah, I protected my money, but more than that, I protected my integrity, my boundaries, my future. The $150 million was nice. Don't get me wrong, changed my life in practical ways I'm grateful for every single day. But the real prizes? Those were different. The charity work. The financial literacy programs helping people avoid the kind of pain I'd experienced. Watching kids get scholarships who couldn't have afforded college otherwise. The corporate retreat business, teaching ethical leadership to people who actually wanted to learn, watching executives realize that success without integrity is just hollow bullshit dressed up in expensive suits. The relationship with Sally, built on genuine connection instead of what I could provide. Waking up next to someone who values me for who I am, not what I have. And maybe most importantly, the peace of mind that comes from knowing I stood up for myself when it mattered most. Nicole tried to steal my lottery winnings. She thought she could waltz back into my life after abandoning me and take half of everything I'd won. Instead, she lost everything. Her marriage, her money, her credibility. I made damn sure she got exactly what she deserved, nothing. Some people might call that revenge. I call it justice. And you know what? It feels absolutely perfect. This story isn't just about me and Nicole, though. It's for every person who's ever been betrayed by someone who only came back when there was something to take. For everyone who's been abandoned during the hard times, then watched someone resurface during the good ones expecting to share in the success they didn't help build. For anyone who's ever had to fight to protect what they earned from people who thought they deserved it without putting in the work. You don't owe them anything. Not your money. Not your success. Not your forgiveness. What you owe yourself is the strength to set boundaries and enforce them, to protect what's yours, to refuse to be a victim. I won my lottery money, but more importantly, I won my life back. Nicole thought she could break me. She was wrong. And making sure she understood that, making sure she faced consequences for trying, that wasn't cruelty. That was justice. And I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. I believe stories such as this find us for a reason. If this one touches you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day. In the meantime, there are 2 stories on the screen that are even better.